Hello and welcome everyone in another episode of Researchers Celebrity. Today we have Dr. Ranjana Sarma with us. A brief about Dr. Ranjana. She has done her bachelor's in technology, BTech, in industrial biotechnology from Anna University. Following the passion for research or driving, more interested in that, she was awarded Hugh Life Science Fellowship in bioengineering, where she worked at Penn State University in USA. Then joined PhD in biochemistry at Montana State University, Bozeman, USA. Moved back to India, did PG diploma in IPR, intellectual property right also at Nalsar, Hyderabad. Then following the research and now taking another role as a grant advisor at DBT Welcome India Alliance. Presently, Dr. Ranjana is program manager at National Center for Biological Sciences, which is also called as NCBS, Bangalore in India. With this brief introduction, I would like to welcome Dr. Ranjana at the platform. Dr. Ranjana.
Thank you, Raj, and thank you so much for the introduction. I'm quite flattered to hear my own journey back to myself.
So we will start the conversation with our trademark question that how and when you decided that you wanted to become a researcher.
I would say that I didn't make that decision. That decision was made for me. I am a third generation PhD in my family. So my paternal grandfather had a PhD in inorganic chemistry. My father's two brothers have PhDs. My elder cousin has a PhD in computer science. So when it was my turn, initially my mother had pushed me towards medical and she wanted a doctor. And my grandfather was also like, so right from the beginning, like, what do you want to be? I want to be a doctor. And about class 8, 9, I was introduced to genetics by a novel by Robin Cook, Chromosome 6. Phenomenal book. And my biology teacher was amazing. So, I mean, from chemistry, it became biology. And her subject was biochemistry. And she was like that teacher, to whom you can go and ask every question. And I would like sneak out of class, a different class, and go into the biology lab and have her show me mitosis and meiosis. And she was like, I guess for her it was a double-edged sword. Like, she doesn't want to encourage me bunking class, but then she can't help it because I'm so taken by her subject. So what was started by my grandfather in some ways, and peer pressure in the family, blossomed into something like that from my biology teacher. Incidentally, her PhD, she was an alumni of Anna University. So when I got my BTech admission, she just couldn't stop telling the world about it. And there again, I met my biochemistry teacher who also taught us bioethics. So I was introduced to the ethics side of it and some amount of administration side of it right at that time. But at that point, there was no campus placement for our BTech, and our super seniors, the fourth years, advised us to start thinking about PhDs. So when I had joined Anna University Center for Biotechnology, the entire batch used to get placed abroad. The entire batch, 100% placement. Nobody went in for a job. Everybody went in for higher academics. Again, it's not like my choice, but a choice made for me. The thing that I had to decide was which university, which subject, and all that. And it just incidentally so happened that genetics and biochemistry and biochemistry won. So it was like a movie script. I went in and the professor was like, see, I have this grant funded. This much question has been answered. I need these results. Do you want to join? Yes, I want to join. And I have full funding. It's an NIH grant. So you get paid at the NIH level. And especially in Montana, the salaries are really good for PhDs. So it all seemed like, oh, this is meant to happen. While I enjoyed the whole thing, I was also doing a lot of lab management, especially the computer lab management, which a lot of PhD students, postdocs end up doing. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, taking inventory, getting all the softwares. So then I finished my PhD, and as usual, I went in for my first postdoc, and it just didn't feel right. I wanted to learn some techniques, but it just didn't feel right. So I thought like maybe there was a problem with the postdoc and the work culture. Maybe I'll change everything. So from US, I moved to Europe because it's a different work culture completely. I got a postdoc at Karolinska. You can't question Karolinska. I mean, if you can't make it there, something's wrong with you, kind of. And it was a very likable project. It was very interesting. It was exactly what I wanted to do. So my PhD, I did structural biology, X-ray crystallography, and small angle X-ray scattering. So the first postdoc I did was on X-ray crystallography. Didn't set right with me. I thought maybe something was wrong with the method. I'm just not meant for it. It's too mathematical. So I'll try small angle X-ray scattering. So the second postdoc was about small angle X-ray scattering. It was in Europe. There was a lot of traveling because in small angle X-ray scattering, you have to be at the beamline versus remotely in X-ray crystallography. But it still didn't kind of work out. Like I love the logistics of it, arranging beamline, teaching the students and all that. But when it came to the nitty-gritty of actual question of I just didn't seem to care. I just didn't seem to care. So I spoke to another senior colleague of mine and back from the US, and she suggested to try out this line. So again, not exactly my choice to move out, but it was a suggestion. And I thought like, I had applied for a early career fellowship with India Alliance earlier, right after my PhD. And I had qualified for it for full application. My idea was I'll come back, I will work for a couple of years, I will find a good PI, and I will go back into research. I mean, sounded like a solid idea. And especially because I wouldn't get to know the PI a little bit and all that. Well, what you plan doesn't happen, sort of. I just kind of fell in love with the administration part. And I turned out to be really good at it. And my fellows attest to it. It's a lot of brain work, and towards like after the fourth year, I realized like I'm really good at management. I mean, this is what I should have done. And there was a time before I applied for PhD when I wrote CAT. Mm-hmm. That was at the time when CAT was the only way you could get into management schools. And of course, I didn't qualify, but I qualified for GRE. So then I was like, okay, maybe should I go back and get a management degree or whatever. I'm not one of the most clear-headed people that you will meet. I'm quite confused, and I have kind of gone with the flow, like how things have kind of happened. So after the 7th year at India Alliance, I took a break because I wanted to go back to management school or whatever, or try something different or apply and go back to research. I had a very confusing time. And then the pandemic came along. And by the time my head cleared and the pandemic cleared, it was 3 years break. And then I started applying for jobs. And out of the blue, this one clicked. Like, it's slightly above grant advisor. It's it's more now, it's an entire program rather than just grants. It's got communication, it's got stakeholder relationships, it's got policy, it's everything. And these are all things that I wanted to do, and I thought I had to go back to school and study, and only then I would get. But turns out that I don't. Like, I mean, it's like the universe is telling me you are ready for it. So that's how I am in this job. And when I had started out in this job, I was very like, I had this major imposter syndrome that, oh my God, where have I come? Can I manage this? This is just too big for me. But I have a very, very good mentor in my boss. He's very patient, and he seems to know exactly. I mean, I'm guessing that he's a really good PhD supervisor because he paces it very, very well. He paces it very well. So, and that's how I am. So I guess one of the things that I have been lucky, I was very lucky with my PhD supervisor. He had paced it very well for me. Like, I have a structural biology PhD in about 4 years' time. And he never, he said, get 2 postdoc experiences before you decide to, shift back to India or, shift out of research or whatever. He paced it very well for me. And now I have a really good one, someone who's pacing it for me.
So this
That's
is,
kind of the...
yeah, and I think this is very important for all the young researchers. Even I will say for the school-going kids, if they are watching this episode, that the role of your teachers, the way shape your career, you are not, and no one is, as I say, that no one is so visionary that at standard 10th, they can assume of, 20 years ahead where they will see themselves. Because in India, the first line, okay, if you are a biology student, medical is what you are going to do. You are
Yeah.
going to be a doctor. That's like for granted, given you are interested in it or not. But people, the day you say that in 11th standard, you took biology, they're like, okay, now you are a doctor. Okay. This is normal in India that even friends or family or relatives, they start calling you doctor by that. That is first thing. We have seen so many researchers, they were interested in biology, but never wanted to be a doctor.
Yes.
This is what we have seen. With you, what we have seen is like a student who's passionate about biology, bunking the class to learn something. Okay. This is something which I will say that not many students should pursue this. But if
Yeah.
that is what makes you happy, at Researcher Celebrity Empowering Science Foundation, we always believe in breaking the barrier. Do whatever makes you happy. And if this is something apparently which makes you happy, because we all know students do bunk classes for all the stupid things. So what Dr. Ranjana has done was way better and meaningful than all of those. So that justifies all of what you have done.
Yeah.
But talking to a researcher when a young enthusiastic brain moves out of India to United States, let's take step by step. The first step, how was the experience of settling down in there for your fellowship?
So Penn State was very easy because it's a very cosmopolitan university. In fact, the thing there are more in, I mean, the entire computer science department is only Indians and Chinese, a lot of Indians. Bioengineering particularly is very popular with Indians, was very popular with Indians. What I had a problem with was the way I spoke English, which is, in our school is taught with a very convoluted grammar. And the other thing that I had problem with was group studies, because I'm used to studying by myself alone at home, and that's how our schools always promote studying. But in the US, the concept of group study is very strong. And if you can't integrate within the group, then it is very difficult. So the first year I struggled with these things quite a bit. That was a fellowship year at Penn State. I did get a couple of bad reviews as well, that, she's not very communicative, she's arrogant. Obviously, like, I think my English is awesome, I'm from India and all that, but there are other, but we speak so fast, or our roundiness, we have a way of putting words within words within words. In the US, that is not how you speak. So that year was very good for me professionally, because it improved my communication skills a lot. And the fellowship actually came with a mandatory course on communication for 2 semesters. The semester-wide long group studies, group presentations. And that was sufficient to instill the strong collaborative streak that is needed for research, and much more in research management when it comes to stakeholder relationships. So the fledgling that I was arrogant, too arrogant. US curbed my arrogance quite a bit. It also made me stop and look at some of the things I'd taken for granted, that I was very good at talking English, things like that. So good reality check.
Then after the fellowship, you chose, although it was, as you mentioned, that it was kind of more of a movie script, that where everything was ready, you just have to walk in, do something, and take the PhD out. Although in the field, it is not easy to get in 4 years, A. B, it takes a lot of hard work. Doesn't matter which field of PhD you are in. So how was that journey?
Yeah, it was a lot of long nights and a lot of data collection, many long nights in the basement. And it was a very, very steep learning curve. So I can say this only about US PhDs. My impression of the European PhDs is that the learning curve is much shallower, and they don't do the coursework or anything. But that is my experience in Sweden and Germany. I'm not sure about the rest. In the US, especially in the land grant universities, like a state university, you're required to teach as well as attend classes. So I was attending classes, I was teaching, and I was doing research in the lab. And today, if you ask me how I managed to do it, I seriously don't know how I actually managed to study. But I guess in India, we are instilled with this thing of like, you have to do it, or like you study like that for exams. And the first year was that, like, it was a lot of coursework, it was a lot of lab work, everything was new. And I was taking laboratory courses. The second year was a lot of live cells, so I was doing 14-hour shifts, constant, day after day, like 14 days of 14-hour shifts and all. These are things that nobody tells you about a PhD before you join, especially something to do with biology. I'm still lucky that my things were cells. I haven't done any animal work. I know that if it's animal work, or if it's, hex cells, it gets worse. It's like every 9 hours you have to change media, so they keep going back, and you can't go away for a long time. So that way I was lucky, because for me, the cell culture was a wild type strain. So over 1 year, we could get enough cells that I didn't have to do cell culture anymore. So from third year onwards, and actually third year onwards, my schedule was quite normal. It was like from 14 it became 12, and at least I could take weekends off. But it was a lot of writing and managing. Like I mentioned, I was doing a lot of management for the lab. By then I was a lot more stable. So I was writing up my second paper. The first paper writing was quite bad. I wrote the whole paper and then I sent it to him, my PI. He said, write the first draft. And he basically rewrote the whole thing, which is to be expected. But for somebody who wrote it, I felt rage, humiliation. I said, this is not my paper. And that experience actually allows me now to, I've done a lot of communication workshops as part of the India Alliance team. And a lot, especially when we talk about manuscript writing, we tell the students that this is going to happen. That, you think you have gotten it right, especially the story or the flow, but you haven't. Talk to your PI, sit with him. And many PIs are very nice. They actually let you write and then sit with you and write it again so that you get an idea how to write it. That's very good. Many PIs don't teach and that is very bad, because such researchers later on have to use professional services or whatever. And so if any of the researchers is listening in, please sit with your student. I know it takes time, but it's worth the effort. Do it for one paper, and that is sufficient for the rest of them.
Now, and
so that was.
This brings us to our next question. That this is a very valid point about how you shape up the career of your students, especially when they are the PhD students. As you mentioned, this is the case which is true for, if not all, still most of the Indian PIs. They are there to write the manuscripts based on the data, and they take some inputs from the students about the result discussions, about material method. But what they don't take it very seriously, that you are making them handicapped by doing this for them. Because if they want to be a faculty, or they just want to be an active researcher in the field, publication is what in general called for researcher, that is the currency. And if you have not trained them to be rich, that means you are forcing them to be poor and starve.
Yeah.
So now asking you about, okay, so now the PhD is done, postdocs are done. What made you change your mind to go back to India in first place?
That was a very personal reason.
Okay.
It's family.
Okay. And then, because we have seen researcher celebrities at this platform, that they stay quite a bit outside India, and then for family reasons, they just move back in there. Then how difficult was to settle in India after, enjoying research or the culture in US, in Europe, and then now going back. Obviously, you are going back to your own culture, so that's not a shock. But it gives you a reverse shock, because what you have seen, or you have, acclimatized yourself with, now there is no such things again. So how was that experience?
So when I moved back home. That was the big thing. Because this job, the India Alliance job, was in Hyderabad, and my parents are settled in Hyderabad. I wanted to move back home. My grandmother was still alive. Our dog was still alive. So for me, that was a very strong entry point. And it just so happens that so I've got, like, my parents are the kind who are not very typical Indian. They are not, it's like living with adults, like adult roommates. So the social community that they built around that was very welcoming to me. So And the job was so different, just so different. It was it was like, you if you give your mind something else, something creative, constructive to occupy, you don't notice time go by, and suddenly it's 4 years. Like, you don't realize all the other things you miss. Like, instead, like, I threw myself complete. I'm a Bengali, so Durga Puja is huge, and our family is very much involved in the community and all. My mother believes very strongly in giving back to community. So, there are things that she would keep me busy with, and then all the relatives. So it was very much. So it's my family which actually kind of helped me to readjust back. And like I said, about 4 years in, and I'm like, oh, okay, 4 years gone by. I have to start thinking about my career. I can't like just keep sitting and enjoying the job and all that. And then I started thinking about what else, how I should grow and all. So I guess if you have a strong emotional support system, it can be done.
Speaking of support systems for researchers, let's take some time to acknowledge the stress, the burnouts that comes with research. And
Yes.
now in India, we started talking about, mental health of a PhD student, of a postdoc, or the young faculties. According to your experience in India and abroad, in different roles, like in grant advisor, you cannot analyze because there is very limited conversation with the PIs in person. Mostly you are working through the papers. Okay. But now in your present role as a program manager, you interact with PhD students, you interact with PIs, you interact with, from director to the student, everyone. What you recommend a researcher who's going through a tough phase of PhD?
Well, I can recommend reaching out and being more social, but usually the recommendation doesn't work. What I can say is how I managed my research. So I have a very strong liking for sports and martial art. And the crowd at the martial art place was completely different from that. And so you would have different conversations, different challenges. And plus martial art anyway helps you ground. And so I used that as the cushion. Like, you can't expect a person, like, usually when people talk about support system, they always talk about people, right? Like, when I had mentioned my family, I'm not talking about just the person, or it's the network, the fabric of a family.
Mm-hmm.
That fabric includes the community, and it's a place to go, social events, people are laughing. That's very important, I feel, when you're going through a tough phase. Because I would have like these long weekend long beam times where I've slept very little. Ideally, that's not the right time to go and do martial arts, but it clears the head, it helps you relax, and you meet with and it's a contact sport. So when you contact and you know that people are there, and you build very strong social bonds that way. So in my life, martial arts and sports have played very strong roles. And sports in the sense, partner sports.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that a lot of PhD students and faculty in NCBS, they play team sports. Uh, the sports complex is very lively about 6 o'clock onwards, 6 p.m. onwards. And it's very good. It's one of the, because it cannot, support system cannot be a one person. And it's not always possible to reach out to a professional.
Yeah.
Because you have a bad day today and you need it right now. And sometimes the best therapist or the best counselor is your sports partner.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, for that matter, I mean, it could be a musical instrument and it could be a musical teacher. So I guess a creative outlet is what I'm trying to get at. But for me specifically, martial arts and sports have been the best.
And we had researcher celebrities at the platform sharing their experiences. So some people connect with nature more than anything else. So they go hiking, some go cycling and get that rejuvenation back, because that is very important for an active researcher. So now we'll go to the next question answer, we'll say the round. Now, you said you started with that you were not one of the researchers who were very clear-headed. There were choices made for you, and that comprises 80 or 90% of researchers in general. Okay. Then you succeeded in your passion, achieving the PhD, and now the position you are in. You said you went with the flow, and that is something which people sometimes face a problem with, because they want to be in research, but I can say the toxic environment make it so impossible for them that they have to live on their hopes, on their dreams. So if you have seen around your, in your known or an extended network, that when people do this, what do you suggest to those researchers who are facing those things?
I have seen it. In fact, I have seen it in my own PhD lab when I was about to almost nearing the end. And it usually is brought in by insecure students or whose project is not as clearly defined. So for them, it is real hard work or whatever. It's very difficult to fight such a system, because usually it'll spoil the person's mindset also.
Yeah.
Sometimes a clear break is not easy. I have seen that also in my professional experience. You do suffer consequences of leaving because you don't get the letters of recommendation. That's usually the most important thing. The only way out from this is to have a wider network. The wider the network, even as a PhD student, the more you talk to your committee members, other committee members, the better it is. Now, if it so happens that already the toxic environment is such that you're not allowed to talk to people, or you're not allowed to, then it's a real rethink as to, like, do you want to continue? Because you're not learning to collaborate. You will have to collaborate at some point of time anyways. The less number of people know about you, the more difficult it will be to collaborate. So, and building collaboration or building these are part of your support system.
Yes.
So right from the beginning, it's important to, go out there and talk. Journal clubs may talk to people, take their constructive criticism, and see, like, you might find good vibes from someone else.
And this is something which we talk at Empowering Science Foundation, and especially at Researcher Celebrity, that if you are not happy, doesn't matter you are a researcher or you are not, you can enjoy life. And we are here to enjoy this. With this limited time we are on the earth, we should be happy. And We always say this repeatedly. That's how we started the conversation. Do whatever makes you happy. If research makes you happy, absolutely do it. But it is not the only option to be happy. If you think there are other things which ignites you more, which makes you more happy, or which gives you the feeling of that contentness, that you are happy that whatever you have done during the day was productive and you are happy about it, do consider about that. And speaking of this, Dr. Ranjana, I want your marks on how a researcher, when they want to go to an alternative career, where they are not actively, writing grants, submitting papers, but they want roles, something where they are still in touch with research, but without that extra stress of getting funded or, manuscript acceptance or rejection, what they can do.
So there are many opportunities now opening up in India. Research management is still not a very stratified profession, but it's starting to get recognition. We have a group, a gathering of them. There is also now science illustration as a career, and there are lots of that happening now, especially post-pandemic. You have science activism, though that is dominated by the law people, but it's there. But the one field which is opening up the most is science communication. It's opening up quite big, and there is a lot of scope right now. So these are the other options that one can look at. I will not recommend going the IPR way, the intellectual property rights way, because no law firm will hire you. In India, you need a law degree to be considered, but institutions will look at it, and there are positions that are opening up on that. The other kind of positions that are opening up are on ethics, where publication ethics and plagiarism and all of these things are taken care of, which is manuscript right. So you would be supporting the researchers in their manuscript writing and data collation. And with post-pandemic, the amount now there's a lot of open data thing, so that needs to be monitored. So these are other positions that are opened. And of course, you can go the clinical way, as in do the supporting of the clinical or the community health work. Yeah. But again, they prefer people from medical background mostly.
Yeah.
So these are the options.
No, I think this is enough for the students who want to be in touch with research but don't actively. So if I can summarize and taking notes from Dr. Ranjana's words, it's like ethics, science communication, research management, and so many other things you can do. But now what you need for that is strong communication, a bit of knowledge of policy making, stakeholder engagement is something which you just cannot avoid of. And then imposter syndrome is something which is for us, all of us, anywhere, everywhere. Doesn't matter where you change the field. So the role of the advisor, which Dr. Ranjana mentioned presently and forever. So if you have a brilliant advisor, you can go anywhere and you can kick out your imposter syndrome by performing in there. That is what we can say. So now we are already at the edge of our conversation. Dr. Ranjana, last concluding remarks for researchers in India.
Thank you for doing the research. Somebody needs to do it. there are people acknowledging you, and I know publication is difficult. I know getting grants is difficult. I know how difficult it is to get government grants, but we research managers are here to support you. And for us, it's a pleasure to actually work with your researchers and be able to be part of the new innovations that come across. And anytime we can support you in any way, please reach out.
Thank you, Dr. Ranjana. And with this, now I will say to all the audience and viewers, if you want to write to Dr. Ranjana, you can go on LinkedIn, write email to her. If you want Empowering Science Foundation to put you in touch with our researcher celebrities, you can write it to us and then we will put you in contact with them. The only thing which we ask at Researcher Celebrity is like, let's celebrate research. So keep doing what you are doing. If you're enjoying it, there is no turning back. And now I will say thanks to Dr. Ranjana for sharing the journey and motivating more young brains. Thank you very much for taking time out.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you and the whole audience. Thank you.